All right. This is my video submission for week 4 for the journal. So, the first question: during your co planning session with your CT, what have you noticed about how teachers do lesson planning? Um, Specifically with my CT, he has his curriculum pretty well down. So, there isn't a lot of, it's just kind of plugging in whatever's there. He's got a pretty set routine. So it's a lot of kind of doing the same stuff over and over, which is good for the students because then they know what they're doing and stuff. He already has a lot of material. Although he has added already some new stuff, some new assignments that he just kind of tests and sees if the students like it or not. How did co-planning contribute to the lesson plan and to your knowledge of planning? Um, he we talk about what we want to do a lot of the time. Whenever I want to take over a class, we'll we'll talk about what we want to do, what if I want to do just a lecture or if I wanted to introduce an assignment or something. Um, yeah, that's it for the first one. How do teachers manage their classroom? What management styles and strategies have you observed? Describe and compare a few of them. Which do you think may work best for you and why? Um, I'd say me and my CT have a pretty similar management style. I like to especially kind of get one on one with the students, especially since they're in high school. It's a lot easier to have like a meaningful like adult to adult kind of a relationship and talk, and I think they honestly respect it if you do treat them like an adult, so you're not like talking to them in a or talking down to them or whatever. You're actually having like, but at the same time you're also trying, and my CT does this too, that you're constantly trying to get them back if they're distracted or whatever. You're constantly trying to get them back onto task, doing the thing. So like you'll make fun of them, you'll do all this stuff like, oh, why are you not working? Okay, come on, man, like that kind of stuff, bringing the other students into it. It's not necessarily like a shaming kind of thing. That it's they know it's all a game. They're players in it too. So if you don't respect that they're also players, then there isn't then the game doesn't really work. But you do have to uh, try and be, I guess, the chess master, and try and be the one in charge. As much as you can with teenagers. What are majors? I've only uh, observed a couple other teachers. Both my parents are teachers though, so I've observed their management styles. My dad has a very similar management style. I think it works especially well with it's with high schoolers. I think a lot of the thing with teaching high schoolers, especially classroom management, is that respect. And if you are just talking down to them and just like, it's this is my room, it doesn't matter or whatever, if there isn't like kind of a back and forth and you're like you're allowing them to see like a human side of you, then nothing really good is gonna come of that. I've seen a lot of teachers, at least that I've had or whatever, that the extreme authoritarian, where it's my way or the highway, and that if you scare them enough, it can work. But a lot of the times they'll rebel or whatever. And so if you take kind of, I would say that the way I like to do it, and the way the teachers that I respect do it is kind of like a hybrid authoritarian, where you're allowing for that back and forth, but at the same time you're pushing for your final objective of what they're supposed to do and what kind of in the curriculum in the classroom. Um, and it's especially for high school, it's different than like a elementary school where you they don't like if you're kind of mean to them. I guess I mean, like I've taught in a couple third grade and preschool and stuff, and it's a completely different ball game where you have to um kind of, they're still children, so it's not the same. Whereas high schoolers, they do this in their everyday life where they're constantly jabbing at each other. So if the teacher does it, then they as far as I can tell, they respect that. Um, okay, next one. Identify the students in your classroom with special needs. Each give students struggling areas of low systemic. Describe what you have noticed about these students' strength and areas of need. So I've already we have a couple. Well, I'm in a like 90% Hispanic area, so the English language learners are a big part of it. I've already interviewed for one of the classes we had to interview um, English language learner and understand what their strengths was, and uh, he was saying the one I interviewed, he was saying, and I found this really interesting, but his best way of learning were he likes more verbal stuff. So if I'm in a history class, so a lot of the time we got like a lecture going, you got slides and they're reading, but he said most of the things he learns is when we're talking, and that's the stuff that he can understand better, and the writing and the just plain reading, he gets some of it, but it's not as much as if we are directly talking, and he'll understand that a lot better. Um, and I would say, uh, at least in our school, the majority are just plain bilinguals, and there's a small minority that either speak no English, or it's still very much a learning curve for them. I know that there's a couple, or there's one there's a couple in one of our continuation school that they're just Spanish. But we haven't really had it's not a really a huge problem. Because a lot of the time we'll have because it's 90% Hispanic. Most of the people also speak Spanish and English, so there's a plethora of translators, and there isn't really a disconnect, um, unless we're forcing them to write in English or whatever. It's a little bit hard for them, and I would say a lot of the time it is kind of sad that we're forcing them to write in English, but it's just kind of it's just the way the world is. So there's nothing really we can do about that. But I like we try the best we can to accommodate them and stuff like that. Um, there's a couple, or there's one student in particular in one of the classes I teach. He is, I believe he's on the spectrum. I believe he has autism. And he's pretty high functioning, so it's not the biggest problem. He'll have like outbursts every now and then where like he doesn't really get social cues and stuff like that, but it's never a problem. And the other students are pretty respectful of him. They might laugh sometime at the stuff he says, but it's they all know each other because it's a small town, so they've known this guy for a long time. But most of the time with him, he'll focus on like one thing, and he won't move on to the next thing. And so a lot of the time you got to constantly be like, hey Eric, come on man, keep going, move on to the next thing. We're on this thing now. You're taking a little while on this thing. um and it isn't really a problem, at least not that I've seen so far. He gets his work done. He does the right stuff. He's some but he definitely has the social aspect of it. It isn't the best for him. um Struggling readers, same kind of thing. It's what my CT does, and I think works out most is if it's a reading thing or writing thing, as long as they can get like some things down, and they show the basic gist of what we're trying to teach them, then that's really good enough. And as long as they're showing like a basic understanding what we're trying to teach them, because and because they're not able to write at that level or whatever, we bring it down to that level. We're at whatever level they're at. So we're not trying to fail them for not knowing how to write in English, because it's not their fault. Okay, last one. Assessment is a tool for learning, not just a way to measure learning. How do you and your CT use formative assessment and checks for understanding to promote student learning in the classroom? We do a good variety of assessment. My CT, he doesn't do, or he's done a couple time multiple choice, the traditional kind of multiple choice stuff, short response, but he's pretty big into project stuff, so that it gives them some leeway if they're not on that so it broadens it enough so that the kids that have that learning issues or whatever, or English language learners are able to do it. Like we're doing a right now, it's we're talking about Enlightenment philosophers, and they have to make a wanted poster, and so they're drawing a picture, and pictures are pretty good at crossing the language barrier. But then they do have to write like five facts about that philosopher. But it's even for the language learners, they're pretty. They'll look on the computer. They'll figure it out, and they usually get it down. But a lot of the assessments that we do are pretty like that. Um, like example I can think of for the U.S. history class that he does, we he was noticing that on the previous test, they weren't figuring out horizontal and vertical integration, which is the economic thing from history. Uh, but so he had him do a like a small kind of quiz at the beginning where he had him draw out vertical, horizontal uh, assimilation or whatever. Um, and as we realized, because they didn't do as well on the test, that they also didn't do as well on this assessment. And so after that, we went through everything, we explained it to them, and we tried to make sure that they understood, because it is a pretty big concept in that class. Um, yeah, but like I said, yeah, a lot of it we're not doing that traditional thing. It's a lot more creative kind of assessment where they're creating a project, and they're figuring out the ideas, and it's I think it's a lot better than just that multiple choice and short response, because it definitely gives them options, and they seem to like it better, even though they complain the whole way through. But I think it's I think it's better for them.